The FIA did not just create safety car chaos at Silverstone. They may have exposed the one thing Formula One drivers fear more than losing: a race that stops feeling fair. Because once the safety car comes out, everything can change in seconds. A lead can vanish. A strategy can collapse. A podium can disappear. And if race control's decisions look unclear, the entire Grand Prix turns into a courtroom instead of a race. That is exactly why drivers are furious. The source points to FIA investigations, a British Grand Prix grid penalty after investigation, curfew breaches avoiding punishment, and a Mercedes review request being accepted. That means this is not happening in isolation. The paddock is already watching the FIA closely, comparing every penalty, every non-penalty, every review, and every explanation. So when Silverstone explodes into safety car controversy, nobody sees it as just one decision. They see a pattern. A controversial FIA call. Safety car chaos. Drivers demanding clarity. Penalties in the background. Other breaches escaping punishment. And now the biggest question in Formula One is not who had the fastest car. It is whether race control is bringing order to the chaos or becoming part of it. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why the safety car chaos at Silverstone made Formula One drivers so angry, you have to understand one thing first. The safety car does not simply slow the race down. It can completely rewrite it. A driver can spend lap after lap building a gap, protecting tires, managing pressure, and controlling the rhythm of the Grand Prix. A team can spend the entire race calculating pit windows, fuel targets, tire temperatures, and rival strategy. A podium can look secure. A victory can feel almost protected. A recovery drive can be perfectly timed. Then the safety car appears. And suddenly, everything changes. The gaps disappear. The tires cool down. The field compresses. Drivers who were too far away are suddenly close again. Teams that had already committed to one strategy are forced to rethink everything in seconds. A driver who had built his race carefully can lose control of it without making a single mistake. That is why safety car decisions are so sensitive. Because they are not only about safety, even though safety always comes first. They also reshape competition. And when competition is reshaped by race control, the process has to feel absolutely clear. Drivers need to know what is happening. Teams need to know what the procedure is. Fans need to understand why the race is being handled in a certain way. And most importantly, everyone needs to believe the same rules are being applied to everyone. That belief is everything. At Silverstone, the controversy hit the nerve because the paddock was already watching the FIA closely. The source points to FIA investigations, a British Grand Prix grid penalty after investigation, curfew breaches that avoided punishment, and a Mercedes review request being accepted. Those details matter because they show the atmosphere around the governing body was already loaded with questions. Investigation. Penalty. No penalty. Review. Those words create tension. Because in Formula One, teams never look at one decision alone. They compare it. They remember what happened last week. They remember what happened to another team. They remember who was punished, who was not punished, who got reviewed, and who got away with it. That is how controversy grows. Not always from one shocking moment. Sometimes it grows from accumulation. A driver sees one ruling and thinks, fine, that is the standard. Then another incident happens, and the standard seems different. Then another team avoids punishment. Then another driver is investigated. Then a review is accepted. Then the safety car creates chaos at one of the biggest races of the year. And suddenly, the anger is not only about Silverstone. It is about trust. That is the real issue. Formula One drivers can accept bad luck. They know a safety car can ruin a race. They know a rival might get the perfect pit stop window. They know a neutralization can erase a lead they worked hard to build. That is part of racing. Cruel, but accepted. What drivers cannot accept is uncertainty in the process. If the safety car comes out, they need to know the procedure will be consistent. If a penalty is given, they need to know the reasoning. If a breach avoids punishment, they need to understand why. If a review request is accepted, they need to know what standard was met. If a race is neutralized, restarted, or controlled under safety car, they need to believe the decision is not improvised under pressure. Because inside the car, drivers do not have the luxury of full context. They are not sitting in a quiet room with replays, documents, and time to debate. They are driving at extreme speed, listening to radio messages, managing deltas, keeping tire temperatures alive, watching the car ahead, protecting from the car behind, and waiting for instructions that can change the race instantly. A single message from race control can decide whether they prepare to attack, defend, pit, save tires, or hold position. That is why clarity matters. If the message is confusing, the driver's race becomes unstable. If the procedure is unclear, the team has to guess. And guessing in Formula One is dangerous. A team can pit because it thinks the safety car will stay out. Another team can stay out because it expects a restart. One driver can prepare tires aggressively. Another driver can protect them. One strategist can gamble. Another can freeze. And when race control's final decision becomes clear, one group looks brilliant and another looks robbed. That is where fury comes from. Not simply because someone lost, but because someone feels the race was decided by uncertainty. That feeling is explosive. And Silverstone is the wrong place for that feeling to appear. Silverstone is historic. It is emotional. It is fast. It is one of the races where every decision feels amplified. Fans are loud. Teams are tense. Drivers know the importance of the event. The British Grand Prix carries weight, and when controversy touches it, the whole sport reacts. So when safety car chaos happens there, it does not fade quietly. It becomes part of the season's argument. And that argument becomes even stronger when the FIA is already surrounded by recent investigations and rulings. That is why the source's details matter. A post-sprint investigation with a driver inside the points summon tells the paddock the FIA is watching incidents closely. A British Grand Prix grid penalty after investigation tells teams penalties are actively shaping the weekend. Curfew breaches avoiding penalty tells others that not every breach leads to punishment. A Mercedes Monaco review request being accepted tells teams the review process can reopen or challenge previous matters. Each one might have its own explanation. Each one might be technically justified. But the paddock does not only react to isolated explanations. It reacts to the pattern it feels. And if that pattern feels inconsistent, the FIA becomes the story. That is the last thing Formula One needs. Because the FIA is supposed to be the structure behind the race, not the headline above it. Race control should be trusted enough that drivers can focus on driving. The rulebook should feel predictable enough that teams can make decisions without wondering whether interpretation will shift from one event to another. But when drivers become furious, it usually means that trust has been shaken. And once trust is shaken, even correct decisions become harder to accept. That is the dangerous part. The FIA can make a decision that is technically within the rules, but if the explanation is poor, anger remains. The FIA can choose not to penalize a breach for valid reasons, but if the paddock does not understand the logic, suspicion grows. The FIA can handle a safety car according to procedure, but if the communication feels chaotic, the result still feels controversial. In Formula One, being right is not always enough. You also have to be clear. And that is what Silverstone exposed. The sport is now so transparent, so analyzed, so heavily watched, that every decision needs to survive immediate public examination. Onboards are studied. Radio messages are clipped. Timing screens are compared. Regulations are quoted. Fans and journalists build arguments within minutes. Teams bring their own evidence. Drivers speak with emotion. There is no quiet corner for uncertainty anymore. Everything becomes visible. And once a decision becomes visible, it has to make sense. That is why the FIA's challenge is enormous. Safety situations are not easy. No one should pretend they are. Race control has to protect marshals, drivers, track workers, and spectators. They have to assess risk in real time. They have to coordinate recovery vehicles, track status, yellow flags, deltas, lapped cars, restart timing, and regulation compliance, all while the race is still moving. That is a hard job. But because it is hard, the standards have to be even higher. The harder the situation, the clearer the explanation must be. Drivers can accept difficult calls if they understand them. Teams can accept painful outcomes if they believe the process was consistent. Fans can accept a race ending differently if the chain of decisions is transparent. But when the chain feels unclear, every affected driver feels wronged. And every unaffected driver wonders if he might be next. That is why the anger spreads beyond the driver who loses the most. A safety car controversy affects the entire field psychologically. Even a driver who benefits may worry the result will be questioned. Even a driver who escapes penalty may know rivals will compare the decision later. Even a team that gains track position may understand the win will carry debate. Controversy stains everything. That is what makes this situation so dangerous for Formula One. The sport can survive a chaotic race. It can survive drama. It can survive angry radio messages. It can survive strategic heartbreak. But it cannot survive a growing belief that the system is unpredictable when the stakes are highest. That belief would damage every future race. Because from that point on, every safety car becomes suspicious. Every penalty becomes political. Every no penalty becomes evidence for somebody. Every investigation becomes a battleground. Every review request becomes a weapon. And that is not racing. That is procedural warfare. Formula One already has enough pressure on track. Drivers are dealing with cars that demand total precision. Teams are making decisions with seconds available. Rivals are separated by tiny margins. Championships can swing on one pit stop, one lockup, one restart, one penalty point, one safety car. The sport does not need extra uncertainty from unclear governance. That is why drivers demand consistency so strongly. Consistency does not mean every incident gets the same penalty. Incidents are different. Context matters. Conditions matter. Intent matters. Consequence matters. The regulations are complicated. But consistency means the logic has to feel stable. The reasoning has to connect. The standard has to be understandable. If one breach avoids punishment because of a specific reason, explain that reason. If another incident leads to a grid penalty, explain why that case crossed the line. If a review request is accepted, explain the threshold. If a safety car procedure changes the race, explain the sequence in a way drivers and teams can accept. That is how trust is protected. Without that, anger becomes inevitable. And this is why the phrase, "drivers furious," carries so much weight. It is not simply about emotion. It is about the people most exposed to the consequences of these decisions saying, "We need better clarity." Because drivers are the ones inside the cockpit when the procedure becomes reality. They are the ones trying to keep tires alive behind the safety car. They are the ones preparing for a restart that may or may not come. They are the ones whose race can be ruined by timing they cannot control. Their frustration is not abstract. It is personal. Imagine leading a race, managing everything perfectly, then seeing the gap vanish. Imagine choosing not to pit because you believe one thing will happen, only to watch race control's decision make that call look wrong. Imagine losing track position because your team had to guess. Imagine hearing after the race that another incident was handled differently. That is why anger builds. Because the driver feels the result was moved by forces outside his driving. There is no worse feeling for a racing driver. They can accept being overtaken. They can accept being outqualified. They can accept tire degradation. They can accept losing a duel. But losing because the procedure felt unclear is different. It leaves no clean answer. And drivers hate no clean answer. That is why Silverstone may become a reference point for future debates. Not because every detail from the source proves one specific safety car error, but because the broader context is clear. The FIA was already under the microscope. Investigations and penalties were already part of the story. Then the British Grand Prix produced safety car chaos, and the frustration found a place to explode. That is how flashpoints happen. Pressure builds quietly. Then one race releases it. And once released, it does not disappear immediately. The next race will carry the aftershock. Drivers will ask more questions in briefings. Teams will demand clearer procedures. Strategists will prepare for more uncertainty. Journalists will compare every decision to Silverstone. Fans will watch race control more closely. The FIA will feel that. And it has only one real way to respond. Clarity. Not defensiveness. Clarity. A clear explanation of what happened. A clear explanation of why decisions were made. A clear explanation of how similar situations will be handled in the future. A clear standard that teams can understand before they are trapped inside the next chaotic moment. Because another chaotic moment will come. It always does. Another car will stop. Another safety car will appear. Another late race decision will compress the field. Another driver will feel a result slipping away. Another team will gamble. Another rival will gain. That is Formula One. The question is not whether chaos can be eliminated. It cannot. The question is whether race control can manage chaos without becoming part of it. That is the central issue after Silverstone. And it is why the first major lesson is so important. The safety car itself is not the villain. The safety car is necessary. It protects lives. It creates a safer environment when danger appears. No serious driver wants marshals exposed, cars stranded in dangerous positions, or debris ignored just to preserve a race gap. The problem begins when the competitive consequences of the safety car are not managed with enough visible clarity. That is where anger lives. Not in safety. In uncertainty. Drivers want to know that when safety intervention changes the race, the sporting process remains stable. They want to know the rulebook does not bend under pressure. They want to know penalties, reviews, and exceptions are explained with the same standard for everyone.